Good evening, I'm Tana Carley.
I'm Tim Taylor. Thanks for joining us. Here's what's happening. The workers' faces outside the Cleveland Press building told it all. They just learned from watching our exclusive story at 6 o'clock that the press will print its last edition tomorrow, going out of business after 103 years.
In the first of two reports, News Center 8 CityCam reporter Dale Solly tells us live that a news conference in the morning will make the end official. Dale?
News Center 8 confirmed the story, Tana, late this afternoon. Our source, a union person close to the paper's finances. We will keep our source confidential. And yes, there was shock and anger among many of the 900 workers affected. Owner Joe Cole and associate publisher-editor Jerry Merlino left the building quickly after our story at 6 o'clock. They'd given the workers no indication of the closing.
To me, it's a shame to come out, bring your truck in and you come in and all of a sudden you see all the news people standing around here and you think it's for a groundbreaking ceremony, but here's for a funeral.
We weren't allowed inside with our camera after being stopped by a security guard, but Barb Chudzik spoke for all the press reporters.
We always sit around and say, what are we all going to do? There's going to be a lot of talented journalists that aren't going to have jobs, and we're not going to be able to find them in this city.
And so, when the press is rolled in the morning, they will put out the final edition ever of the Cleveland Press. The paper reportedly was losing $500,000 a month. Our sources say it lost $10 million all told since Joe Cole took over. Cole reportedly considered filing for bankruptcy, but that would have put the workers' pension and severance plans in doubt, so that part of it is out. A sidelight to all of this, off-duty Cleveland police officers have been hired. They're inside the building now, and they're checking all the packages that the workers may be carrying out home with them. In any event, all of that is going to end tomorrow for 900 workers and 103 years of tradition. Dale Solly live with the CityCam downtown.
Cleveland Press driver Freeman Potter had just stopped to have a beer after work. He watched our newscast at 6, and that's when he first heard the news.
Let's hope they're wrong. Definitely wrong, because I've 15 years myself. A lot of guys done about 25, 28 years, 30 years, some of them do. I think it'd be an awful blow this time for one newspaper.
The Cleveland paper's well-known religion editor had the reaction all the paper's employees are fighting: shock, disbelief, and that empty feeling of uncertainty.
One of these minutes it's going to hit me, that I'm out of work. And where am I going to get work now? Because I'm 27 years old, and that's kind of hard to get work at 27.
And for other press employees, the news brought home that very real fear of suddenly not knowing how to pay a promised debt.
I've got a beautiful car, and I really, I hope that I can pay for it.
It's hard to explain, but there's something about the business of gathering news that makes this much more than a job. It's a way of life, and knowing this made this up.
Today, our reporters tried to gauge the impact of the paper's death. We have a series of reports, beginning with News Center 8's Carl Monday.
As a proud newspaper published its last edition, employees cleaned out their desks and said their goodbyes. For people like Bob Klingman, an uncertain future left little time for reflection.
Where do I go? What do I do? 51 years old, who's going to hire me?
This morning, Bob and 900 other press employees received goodbye letters from Joseph Cole. Ambitious young people like Sally Panovic.
How long have you been working here at the press?
3 months.
For photographer Bernie Noble, it's been nearly a lifetime.
37 years. That's not including today, of course.
Today, both Bernie and Sally are unemployed.
After devoting 37 years to a business and an art, that one day you find out you have nothing left at all.
Most press reporters said they weren't surprised by the paper's demise. They just didn't expect it so soon. A few seized the occasion to take a parting shot.
I'm skeptical, cynical about the whole thing. There's some anger, a lot of hurt there.
But mostly there were words like dignity and pride when describing their association with the press.
The newspaper staff made every effort to pull this paper through.
For 900 press employees, the satisfaction of knowing they gave it their best. Something to carry them through the difficult times that lie ahead.
We did everything we could do. And I think that it's just a shame that this had to happen.
Carl Monday, News Center 8, Cleveland.
This is Gary Stromberg at Public Square. It was just before noon when a truck carrying the last edition of the Cleveland Press arrived here.
Ted, the news hawker, was about to begin his final day of work. Ted had become somewhat of a fixture on the square, shouting out headlines, hawking papers to people rushing to catch a bus or a rapid. Today, Ted didn't have to shout. He didn't have time. He was mobbed.
I come from Parma all the way down there just to get a press.
It looked like people were buying papers to read about the end of World War II.
Why'd you buy the press today?
Just because it's the last one.
Ted and his assistant just couldn't handle all the money being shoved in front of them.
I'd feel like a traitor if I didn't buy it today.
The press would have never gone under if people would have lined up to buy it like they did today.
I wanted to save the last issue. It may have value in the future.
Ted was so torn by his emotions, he didn't want to speak.
No, I'm nothing to say, fellas.
After today, there will be no Cleveland Press, and there won't be anyone hawking newspapers here at Public Square. It seems Cleveland has lost a great deal. Gary Stromberg, News Center 8, Public Square.
This is Stan Childress in the city room of the Plain Dealer. One day there will be talk here of the day when the Cleveland Press folded, the way there was talk 22 years ago when the Cleveland News died. The mood was somber. In fact, many on the staff wore black armbands. And though the Plain Dealer may gain as many as 100,000 new readers, publisher Tom Bale's first words to me were,
well, my feelings are, first of all, always of certain sorrow because it is our business where we're losing one.
There was absolutely nothing in today's Plain Dealer about the demise of the Cleveland Press. Tom Bale explained that today that's their story. But of course tomorrow there will be plenty about it. Part of the story will be the genuine outpouring of support shown by the PD staff for the press employees as they marched in front of the press building.
These people did a job. Now they don't have jobs. It's a very sad day when a newspaper goes down.
And there are those ironic quirks of fate, like Brent Larkin's recent switch from the press to the Plain Dealer. And sports writer Dan Coughlin, who switched from the PD to the press recently. These two newspapers have been fierce competitors over the years. Today, the last one standing has a tougher, not an easier job.
We think our responsibilities are increased, and we intend to meet those responsibilities.
This is Wayne Dawson. After the initial shock of learning we would no longer have two daily newspapers from which to choose, area residents and civic leaders had this to say about the death of the Cleveland Press.
I think the city is going to miss something with the press gone. It's been an institution as long as I've been here, which is all my life.
Town's too big to have just one paper.
I think when you lose a newspaper like this, or any city, you're losing part of the city and part of the heart of the city. I hate to see it happen, both for the newspaper and for all the fine people that are working there.
I guess it's going to put more pressure on the Plain Dealer now.
I think the whole community will suffer as a consequence.
I don't think it should have folded. I think they should have tried harder to keep it going.
I think it's a real tragedy because I think we really need two newspapers in our city.
It's really bad. I just feel bad.
One resident summarized the feelings of thousands of greater Clevelanders, saying, it's like the death of an old friend. Wayne Dawson, News Center 8, Cleveland.
Advertising agencies deal with all kinds of companies and businesses, and it's advertising that keeps a newspaper financially fit. So where did the Cleveland Press go wrong? Advertising agencies that we talked with said the problem began with circulation. The Cleveland Press was a supplementary route. After all, advertisers could get more with the competition.
With the Plain Dealer, they could get about 60% of the adults in Cuyahoga County. If they would add the press, they'd only add another 20 to 25%. But they would double their costs since the rates were about the same.
But one spokesman feels that the newspaper's fate may have been determined over the last 15 years with the changing of its editor and the paper's personality.
So often a great newspaper is a reflection of the personality of its editor. And when it has a tremendously strong editor over a long period of time who puts his imprimatur on that newspaper, it assumes much of his personality.
Some ad agencies say now the Plain Dealer will be able to capitalize on the situation. They said they would not be surprised if advertising in the Plain Dealer goes up in the near future, along with the price of a newspaper. Koran Mahalik, News Center 8, Cleveland.
But there is a new development tonight. Cleveland Press employees are meeting at this hour at the Lakeside Holiday Inn. Representatives of the Newspaper Guild have told them there is a possibility that another owner may be interested in the paper, but that something would have to come of it tomorrow for that deal to go through. The potential owner is an out-of-town businessman, but no other details were given.
Up next, the closing of the press has also put thousands of young entrepreneurs out of business.
But another area afternoon newspaper is now hoping that their business will be picking up. Stay with us for details.
More than 6,000 Cleveland area youngsters learned a hard lesson today at a tender age, how it feels to be unemployed. As News Center 8's Mike Cregan reports, until today it was just a word they had heard on TV or had seen in the headlines of the newspaper they used to deliver.
The headline in today's Cleveland Press didn't mention unemployment, but that was the net effect for some 6,500 press carriers. With the final 2 bundles of papers delivered to John Bruchetta's home on East 61st Street today was a hand-printed note. It said this was the press's last day. It thanked him for his loyalty.
Should have told me in 2 weeks' notice or something like that, so I was aware of it. This way it just happened like that.
John is 13. He realizes his problems are small compared to those faced by the hundreds of full-time press employees who are suddenly without work. But John's disappointment is no less real.
You know, it's going to be kind of strange for me because for 3 years I've been doing this route right after school. This way I just go home and sit.
The lessons John has learned in 3 years as a paper boy will stay with him long after he delivers his last paper. Responsibility, how to handle money, how to deal with people. Many of this town's most successful people got their start just this way. That there'll be fewer such opportunities in the future is another sad footnote to the death of the Cleveland Press. Mike Cregan, News Center 8, Cleveland.
If there is a name that is synonymous with the Cleveland Press, that name is Herb Camm. A top executive and columnist for 13 years, Camm was still editor emeritus on the press's last day. He told Virgil Dominic what Cleveland will miss now that the press is gone.
Cleveland has lost a very competitive, caring paper. People now simply won't have that alternative to go to. There are so many organizations in town that have something to say, a cause to fight. There are so many things that need probing. There are so many wrongs that need to be righted, and I don't think one paper alone can do it. And it's been demonstrated, Virgil, in previous cases where papers have folded. The surviving paper simply does not have that sharp edge it had when it had a competing paper pushing it, making it do a better job. That's what we'll miss most of all.
Camm added that the press could have been saved, but it would have taken cooperation from the plain dealer. Cooperation that never came. There is another major afternoon daily newspaper that may stand to gain from the demise of the press. News Center 8's Akron correspondent Dick Russ reports live on how the collapse of the press will affect the Akron Beacon-Journal. Dick?
Well, Tim, we won't be seeing the Beacon-Journal on the doorstep of people in Cleveland anytime soon, but the paper should benefit in several ways from the demise today of the press. The Beacon's been rolling off the presses in the city of Akron every afternoon for 143 years in Akron, and while business now isn't as great as previous years, the paper is still making money. And it has 800 employees. That's almost as many as the press had. So why has one afternoon paper survived while another one has disappeared?
Competition. The press had an extremely aggressive and strong and resourceful competitor in the plain dealer. And competition tends to do that. I think it had to do with the fact that unquestionably the press was out of touch with its role in that city.
The Beacon-Journal will likely add 2 more full-time reporters to join the one who's on the Cleveland beat now, and they'll try to increase their circulation in the southeast suburbs, where it currently makes its biggest impact in the Cleveland market. Plus, the advertising dollars that it will take in, dollars the press used to have, will help the Beacon-Journal as well. As Editor Poorman put it, we are not going to sit down and let an opportunity pass us by. This is Dick Russ, News Center 8, live with the City Cam in Akron.
And what happens now to the press building and property? Joseph Cole wouldn't say, but News Center 8 City Cam reporter Dale Solly has learned Cole has very definite plans for it.
In fact, Anna, he has had those plans for some time. Joe Cole owns this very lucrative property here at East 9th and Lakeside, and he's had those redevelopment plans in the works now for some time. In fact, it was last November when Cole and Mayor Voinovich first unveiled North Point, an office and hotel complex Cole modestly called the second largest commercial real estate venture in the city's history. It would be built onto the Press building. Now, does today's action affect North Point? Yes, it does. It speeds it up. Architects said the project is full speed ahead and that ground for the complex will be broken later this summer. What about all the extra space that's suddenly available? Well, we've got plans for that, the architect said, but Joseph Cole will have to tell you that. Problem is, Joseph Cole wasn't close to talking about anything like North Point at his news conference. In fact, when reporters started to ask him about it, he simply walked out. The architects wouldn't say if plans for that extra space were in the works all along. Now, there is no doubt that a huge new complex involving a hotel and an office tower would be a great thing for the city. Whether we're going to get it, though, at the expense of the 900 people who used to work here is something that only Joseph Cole can answer. Dale Solly live with the CityCam downtown.
Virgil Dominic has tonight's TV8 editorial on the closing of the Cleveland Press.
Death in the afternoon, they call it when a newspaper like the Cleveland Press dies, but it is more than that. It is more like a death in the family. The Press lived in our community for close to 104 years. It came to us each evening with good news and bad. It told about our joys, our sorrows. We grew up with it. It helped us understand our city and our world. For all its problems, Cleveland is a fine community, and the Press can say truly that it played a central role in the city's development. All of us at TV8 are deeply sorry the Cleveland Press could not win its gallant fight to survive.
Today will be the last day of the Cleveland Press, the last issue.
I'm Dick Spegler of Channel 3 and the Cleveland Press. The Press died today, and tonight the city room is as quiet as a tomb. This is the way it looks. I guess you could say it is a tomb, a sepulcher of memories. Tonight's program is a wake. We are going to do what is done at wakes, share memories of the deceased, talk to the survivors, and begin by asking the question you always ask after a sudden death. What killed the Press? David Lee Miller explores that for us.
As the last copies of the paper rolled off the presses, former employees began to speculate why they were out of work.
I think it's part of the larger economic picture. People just have to cut back somewhere, and that's one of the things that they're trying to do without.
Everyone this afternoon had their own theory why the paper folded. But as press publisher Joe Cole points out, the main problem was money.
We have been affected by a major economic downturn that has brought about a sharp recession nationally, and that has particularly impacted the Cleveland area.
But contrary to Cole's remarks, 5 other major afternoon dailies have also closed their doors in the past year. This scene could have taken place in the city room of the Cleveland Press. Instead, there's a fond farewell at the once great Philadelphia Bulletin. Other major evening dailies to also close include the Washington Star, the Minneapolis Star, the Des Moines Tribune, and the Tonight edition of the New York Daily News. Observers say these papers really didn't die, but were murdered by television news, local suburban newspapers, and a decreasing population in the inner city. More than 10 years ago, press editor Tom Boardman says he saw the writing on the wall and instituted regional or so-called zone advertising in an effort to save his paper.
This gives an advertiser the opportunity to buy only a part of the market. In other words, if I have a drugstore on Waterloo Road, I could advertise by the zoning of where each paper or papers, you have a number of different zones. I could advertise only in those papers which were going to reach people that were potential customers of mine on Waterloo Road or wherever it might be.
But despite Boardman's efforts, advertising and circulation began to fall during the next decade. After taking the paper over in 1980, publisher Cole tried to combat the problem with color pictures, automation, and a new staff. But still, it was not enough. And at least one current staff member, who asked not to be identified, blamed the paper's problems on the current management.
The basic selling concepts that were applied to the Cleveland market were not utilized. They were trying to adapt policies of selling the newspaper vis-a-vis other markets throughout the country, which did not apply to Cleveland. They did not use the expertise of the talent and the abilities of the people and the experience of the people that the Cleveland Press had.
The majority of people, though, say everyone did their best to keep the press in business and blame its death on a nationwide trend that is just beginning. David Lee Miller, Action 3 News.
Tappy Phillips is live at the now deserted Cleveland Press offices along with press editor Jerry Merlino. Tappy, what's it like over there? What have you been talking about?
Dick, it's deserted here. In fact, Mr. Molino did not let any of the media in earlier today so that the staffers here could have the privacy of saying goodbye to their friends, but he did kindly allow us to come up to the city room this evening to talk about what happened. Mr. Molino, you just heard David Lee Miller's report. One of the staffers blamed the management for the death of the press.
I think that's expected because in a staff as large as we have, I had full confidence in the management of the people here, especially in the advertising sales department where that comment come from. The particular individual was a very, very poor producer in himself, and I think he was covering perhaps for his lack of his ability to really make his contribution. And in fact, he and a few others were carried by some very talented people.
You think that was sour grapes?
Absolutely. No question about it.
One question that has been asked many times to me and in discussing the demise of the press, why do things like start a new Sunday edition? Why bring a Dan Coughlin over or start a Go magazine if the paper is faltering? Why not retrench and maybe bolster what's there?
Well, you have to move forward, Tappy, and that's what we were doing. At the time those decisions were made, there was no thought in our mind of a closure. Those decisions were made in the early part of 1982 when things were looking very, very promising. We were projecting a profitability in the last 6 months of our fiscal year, which would end August 31. April and May were months that were projected to bring us very, very close to profitability, when in fact they became very, very heavy loss months.
There was some speculation as well that some of the employees at the Plain Dealer in a contract negotiation coming up this fall could possibly have struck, in which case the press could have capitalized on the lack of circulation there. Why not hold on just for those few months to find out if that would happen, or did you contact people at the Plain Dealer to find out if that was a reality?
No, we never contacted the people there. I think that the scenario that you would outline of a strike and everything would get well here would be like taking an aspirin for a migraine headache. You'd get some short-term relief, but the same problems would come back and perhaps even greater than before you started.
Finally, there was some speculation coming out of the Guild meeting over at the Holiday Inn earlier that there might have been a buyer found for the paper. What have you heard of
Well, I'm not sure that they said there might have been a buyer found. My understanding was that they thought there was a buyer. I would only say this: they have information that we don't have, and if they know something now, I wish they would have known it several weeks ago when we could have used a buyer.
Well, thank you very much, and I understand that your future is as much as vague as everyone else's here tonight.
I'm part of the staff, and I was proud to fight the battle side by side with these great people here at the press.
Thank you for being with us, and we'll be back later, Dick, with the future of this building.
Thank you, Tappy. And when we return, how the press recorded and made more than 100 years of Cleveland history. Stay with us. Cleveland Press, a paper that was my paper and might have been your paper, has been an important part of the Cleveland community for more than 103 years. Action 3, Joe's Mossbrook looks back.
The Press was born here on Frankfort Street in downtown Cleveland on November 2nd, 1878, during the post-Civil War age of corruption. A 24-year-old named Edward Willis Scripps came to Cleveland from Detroit and began publishing what he called the Penny Press, a newspaper aimed at the common man. 6 years later, the name of the paper was changed to the Press. By 1913, with circulation over 100,000, the newspaper moved into this building at East 9th and Rockwell and pushed its circulation over the 200,000 level. Dynamic Louis Seltzer arrived in 1928 and served as the press editor for 38 years, crusading, badgering, prodding the community. His greatest national attention came in 1954 when Dr. Sam Shepard's wife was murdered.
An attempt was being made by certain individuals to in the vernacular, cover-up of what had happened in the Shepherd home on the morning of July 4th, 1954.
I wanted to scream out my innocence, and the more I did or attempted, the more difficult it seemed to be to get through, to gain any sort of acceptance. No one wanted to hear my side of the story.
Prodded by the press, the jury found Dr. Sam guilty, and Judge Edward Blythen sentenced him to life in prison. It was June 6 of 1966 that the Supreme Court ruled that Sam Shepard's conviction here at the Criminal Courts Building in 1954 was unconstitutional because of the trial judge's failure to protect the defendant's rights from massive, pervasive, and prejudicial publicity. Shepard was retried and found not guilty, but his life was in shambles. That same year, Louis Seltzer retired. Tom Boardman took over in 1966 as the new editor of the paper. The Time magazine had named in 1964 as one of the nation's top 10 newspapers. Circulation began to slip from a high of about 400,000. Many members of Seltzer's old staff were retiring. The press began losing readers, beginning a 15-year slide. After Boardman retired in 1979, Scripps Howard promoted associate editor Herb Cam to the top spot, only the fourth editor in the history of the paper.
No one gave me any marching orders outside of that series of meetings designed to streamline the paper to the point where it might be saved. I think I was appointed essentially as a caretaker editor.
Within a year, with red ink getting thicker, Scripps sold its flagship paper to Cleveland businessman Joseph Cole. Cole tried desperately to save the paper, with such innovations as color photos, a Sunday edition, a morning edition, and even a Sunday edition on Saturday. But most of the old staff was gone, and advertising dropped to about 1/7 of the plain dealers. And today, Cole pronounced the last rites for the 103-year-old newspaper. Like too many cities, it leaves Cleveland with only one daily newspaper. Joe Mossbrook, Action 3 News at the Cleveland Press.
A personal word, I'm trying to do a brisk job with this show, but it isn't easy. It's not the easiest kind of show to do. With me is a dear friend of mine and colleague for, in my case, 19 years we've known each other, Norm.
Yes, sir.
Norm Malachek, who, for my money, is the best reporter in the city of Cleveland, including even me. And who today is the best reporter in the city of Cleveland, whose paper just got shot out from under him. Geez, you covered everything.
I would say virtually the gamut of news stories.
25 years you worked there?
25 and a half.
If you look back on it, Norm, you kind of ran it all by you, those 25 years in your head. Do memories kind of flash in?
Indeed, they do. I tend to concentrate on the good days, the glory days, when the press was one of the great newspapers of the country, and Louis Seltzer was the editor. I think he goes down in journalism history as one of the preeminent editors. You'll recall both you and I worked for Louis Clifford, a legendary city
Saw him
editor.
a minute ago on the tape.
He required comprehensive coverage of any story, and I think, too, of...
Never raised his voice. Everybody was terrified of Louis Clifford, absolutely terrified of him, and he'd sit there and he'd say, Fiegler, come over here, and you knew you were in trouble, but he ruled that joint with an iron hand, never raised his voice.
Indeed he did. As a matter of fact, he always asked, would you do something? Never ordered you to do something.
And sent you out to solve murders.
Yes.
In the days before the Supreme Court ruling said we couldn't indict people, right?
What I remember about him is what he demanded of a reporter in terms of thorough coverage. He expected if he assigned you to a murder, that you would know who the killer was. And that reminds me of your coverage of the Colby case. Do you recall that?
Sure, I'll never forget it.
You came back and told...
Lady shot the kid, put the gun in some hamburger and froze it in the freezer, marked it meatloaf.
And you came back and you told Louis Clifford you knew who the killer was.
Well, she flipped out on the front porch to me, yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And Louis Clifford would tease me from time to time because I had been covering another murder, equally sensational, a Beverly Jarrett's murder. You recall that. And I covered that for him. And that murder today is still unsolved. And I recall Louis Clifford teasing me, and yet he always detected some truth there. He said, you know, I send Fegler out to cover a murder, and he finds out who the killer is. He said, you never found out who the killer was in the Jarrett's case.
Did you ever want to do anything else?
Never, never.
What does the best reporter in the city of Cleveland, for my money, do now?
Look for a job. It's that practical.
Any kind of job?
Well, in the newspaper business or in the business related to newspapering.
Norm, we've got a lot of friends over there who've had a lot of experience and who are very good. What do you think the prospects are?
My feelings right now are not of panic at all. I feel as if, well, for the past few years, we've been standing vigil at the beloved one who's passing. And it finally comes, and it's almost strangely a sense of relief. Well, it's done with. The suffering's over, and now we start anew. Yeah. And you look, and you have to build.
But we've seen it fade. Do you think it is this afternoon newspaper syndrome? In other words, do you think that if we went the press, most of them are going to go, the afternoon paper?
I feel that way, and I expected, anticipated that this would happen simply because of the history of what's been happening in the afternoon newspapers.
Would you trade any of it? You wish you'd gone into a different business?
Not at all. Not at all. Memories are too rich, too great, too fond. The Seltzers and the Cliffords and the Feglers, the Witters, the Colliers, the list is endless. The Paul Lillys.
And the Malacheks.
Thank you.
Yeah. You'll meet some of the people who lived and died, or some of their hopes died with the press, when we come back on the next section of Final Edition. Stay with us. It's hard to explain to somebody who isn't in the business, but news is a very special profession. It's people's lives, and it's not very easy to just pick up and do something else. But that's just what the people at the press may have to do because of what happened today. Kevin Coakley found workers who are now standing in lines like those at the unemployment office that they've reported about so often in the past.
The 12th floor hallway of the Hollenden House remained packed throughout the day. Dozens of press employees here beginning their search for a new job. Although it doesn't have any openings to speak of, the Akron Beacon-Journal set up shop to interview them.
I have a long list of places to call and so on. I just happen to have it here. In town, out of town. This is only the beginning.
Jules Wagman worked at the press for 16 years, most recently editing Showtime. He's one of 132 who worked on the editorial staff. Along with salesmen in the circulation department, 293 belong to the Newspaper Guild, the press's largest union.
Everybody's in there calling different papers around the country or newspaper contacts. You know, you try to work the network as much as you can, people you know, and it's a small fraternity. But it's kind of tight right now. A lot of papers are, certainly not many of them are hiring at the moment.
Fred Freeman joined the press just 2 months ago. He spent some time at the Plain Dealer, then started up the magazine Crane's Cleveland Business. After a stint in public relations, he joined the press.
You know, one restraining factor in the 8, 9 years I've been in Cleveland, I found, is the tie and the hold that this town has on a lot of people. And I suspect a lot of them are just not going to be willing to break the family ties, and they'll be willing to drift into something else.
Freeman figures he'll find a job. So does Bernie Noble, who for the past 37 years captured the news on film for the press.
What do I plan to do? Well, I'll go down the street and see if the Plain Dealer is looking for anybody. If I don't find anything there, I'll try several other places I have in mind. And if not, I'll put out some resumes and see if some paper in another city would like an old decrepit photographer.
But the Plain Dealer says it has no plans to hire anyone from the press. Yet there is speculation it'll need some of the press's truck drivers to deliver the increased circulation the PD can expect. 250 Teamsters drove the press's trucks, guys like Wash Marzette.
Oh, I've worked here for 12 years. So I don't know, I was trying to find something else. I don't know, but just like looking for a needle in a haystack, trying to find another job out here. So, but I do the best I can. So I have a family to take care of, so I had to do something.
With the pressmen, printers, paper handlers, and all the others, 407 more are now looking for that needle in the haystack. For many, if not most, that's exactly what it'll be like.
The outlook is terrible, especially for those people who have worked only on newspapers all their lives. Newspapers are dying in Philadelphia, in Washington, and now here in Cleveland.
Kevin Coakley, Action 3 News.
I've got a confession to make to you. I didn't have the heart to go into the press today, and I understand I won't be able to get in tomorrow. They're going to lock it up. So I'm getting, right now, along with you, probably the last look I'll ever have of the inside of the city room where I worked for all those years, for 19 years, and Tappy's in it now. And Tappy, I'm going to look at it while you tell me what you've learned about what's going to happen to that building and that real estate over there.
Well, Dick, I do have some good news for you. Jerry Merlino says that that the employees will be allowed back in tomorrow to clear out their desks, so you will be able to come back here. The first thing that's going to happen is all the contents of the building are going to be sold. That'll take a little while, especially to find a buyer for the big presses downstairs. Secondly, the North Point project is still alive, and that has angered some of the employees here who feel like the money for the North Point project should go to them. The North Point project is a huge hotel office complex to be built on this site. It was scaled down to save some money, and financing has not been secured for it, but on this spot the plans are now to build an office complex right in the front yard here and a hotel right next door.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Approximately 250,000 press readers lost more than a newspaper today. Gone from their lives now are the people who delivered the press. Those persons aged 11 to 75 who brought it to their doorsteps or flung it somewhere in the front hedge. Those people universally known as paper boys. Action 3's Simeon Smith talked with one.
I would go do my papers. The customers would say hi. That would be done, and then it would go day after day. Then they finally come on the news saying that the press has quit, and I'm out of a job, and I don't know what I'm quite surely what I'm going to do.
13-year-old Ron Ricotta has learned some tough lessons the last couple of days. This morning he waited as usual for the press truck to arrive at 11 o'clock. And he waited and he waited. Finally, 3.5 hours behind schedule because of the chaos downtown, driver Frank Nolan reached West 89th Street. His 30-year press career ending with this, his final delivery. What are you going to do now, sir?
Retire. Are you kidding? Who knows?
The shock to young Ron's system came yesterday when he first learned of the press's demise and in turn had to inform his 50 customers. Customers representing weekly earnings of $20 to him.
One of my customers didn't believe me. He had owed me for last week, and then he said, here's for this week, and I told him they went out of business. He didn't believe me. Then he said, what am I going to read? And then I told him, you're going to have to take the PD.
As bad as Ron Ricotta feels, Virgil Rosario feels worse. For 4 years, Virgil, or Junior as he's called, contributed his $15 a week to the family budget. Money that meant even more when his father was laid off from work last fall.
Yes, it's going to hurt me because, like I said, we helped my dad pay some of the bills. And some of the times we used the money to buy clothes for us. And, like, we're paying for our stuff already.
Yeah. You going to be okay?
I hope.
The young businessmen we met today are just 2 of 6,000 carriers that deliver the press. Their combined earnings last year totaled more than $10 million. A loss like that really needs no further elaboration. I'm Simeon Smith for Action 3 News.
You're going to have to take the PD, huh? Well, so are you. I'll have some closing comments when we return.
Jury did not find enough evidence for indictments, despite allegations that the Plain Dealer's owner paid big money to buy out the press and get a monopoly. We have 2 reports on this tonight. First, Channel 3's Tom Barris looks at the 5-year history.
As a result of continuing and significant losses, we are ceasing publication with today's final edition.
5 years tomorrow, Joe Cole announced the press's death, blaming it on money, multi-million-dollar red ink, the loss of readers and advertisers. 900 people lost their jobs. Greater Cleveland lost much more. But the week before that announcement, Cole was getting big money, $22.5 million from PD owner Sam Newhouse. The deal for a list of press subscribers and a company to drum up press business. Experts called those worthless. News reports about the deal spurred the Justice Department probe.
Now, Justice Department handling of this case sparked more controversy. There was dissension between prosecutors and their bosses. At least one was taken off the case. And evidence had to be presented to 2 grand juries because things took so long, the first one's term ran out.
The press's closing brought other lawsuits, and 2 courts called the deal suspicious. Cole and Newhouse just told their stories to the grand jury. It's believed they got immunity. The press is gone, replaced by the North Point office complex, and readers and advertisers have adjusted to a plain dealer-only town. But only grand jurors heard all the facts here, and they decided the best action is no action. But as Tom Sweeney found, there is reaction.
Howard Swindell was the president of the newspaper guild at the press. He freelances now.
If all this were true, we were all sold down the river.
The people from the press think about that when they drive past that beautiful building that is really built on the bones of 900 press employees.
Harriet Peters was a columnist. She does PR at a hospital. The old press building Harriet talks about is a high-priced office building now, North Point. That happened after Joe Cole accepted $22.5 million from Samuel Newhouse, owner of the Plain Dealer.
A source close to the investigation told me he never expected an indictment. He points to this evidence. The first prosecutor was fired, the second one was transferred, and the prosecutors even let the first grand jury expire. It is apparent that the Justice Department did not want anyone indicted.
This 1985 Justice Department memo basically says no people shall be indicted. A company could be indicted. Today, no person, no company was indicted.
It's a sad day for the Reagan Justice Department. It sort of shows their true colors. They don't believe that there's such a thing as antitrust.
Don Cook was one of the reporters for the Akron Beacon Journal who broke the story of the $22.5 million paid to Joe Cole by Plain Dealer owners.
To me, it says that you can pay your competitor some money and he'll go away.
Tonight, Joe Cole says he's delighted and completely vindicated. No one at the Plain Dealer is talking, and one-time press employees are left with questions.
We'll never know what happened 5 years ago.
Tom Sweeney, Channel 3 News.
Tonight, the two men... The grand jury was to decide whether to issue an indictment against Plain Dealer owner S.I. Newhouse and former press owner Joseph Cole. Allegations stem from Newhouse paying Cole $22.5 million after Cole shut down the press. The agreement allowed Newhouse to buy the press's circulation list for $14.5 million.